mind. Okay, we are not the Round Table Podcast. That's just the intro that was set up for here because I forgot to change it.
That's all right. That's
Um,
all right. We've been trying to get on this podcast for quite some time now since we announced it on
yes,
Sunday, and even talking about it well before that.
yes,
So if it goes off without a hitch, I would be very surprised.
yeah. You know what? It's just been one thing after another, and but we're here. We have
Yeah,
made it. We are here. We are at the promised land.
let's
So
hope. I think
let's.
I think it really is. I know we've had discussions outside the podcast about why I felt the need to do this podcast, and you brought up that you were thinking about doing something like that. So I think it's a perfect storm is brewing, and let's see what comes of it.
Yeah, it's a very important thing. It's something that doesn't get talked about as much as it should, and even sometimes when it does get talked about, it's not really followed through on. There's a lot of people that are, advocates, but will be the first person to try to tear someone else down.
Yeah, and not only that, I think we spoke before, like just all the info that's out there. It seems like everybody that does a podcast streams. Of course, you have to have personality, but it comes off to me like they're all just fake.
Yes.
They're playing a persona. They have to say things to get attention. So that's why you get people who are trying to speak to men about mental health or bettering their life. It's always the very similar dialogue. It's always a rude comment about females here, go to the gym, make money, rude comment about girl here, and then just so on and so forth. So somebody just needs to talk directly to guys without having to demean anybody else. And not only that, I think with doing that opens up the audience for females to feel safe to listen and not feel like they're constantly getting run down. So maybe they can get an idea of what any guy, whether it be a father, a brother, spouse, whatever it may be, friend, because guys don't open up enough. So I think maybe us being open with each other and having people have the ability to listen in on it and hear how we dealt with certain issues, how we feel we came out on the other end of those issues, can hopefully help a lot of people. Because as much as I love wrestling, it's kind of a source of dragging me down lately. And I think I like helping more than I like helping with a specific thing. So if this can be an assistance to anybody out there, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree. And mental health, it's something that touches everyone. It doesn't matter what your, social class is. It doesn't matter, any of that. Like, I mean, some of the most successful people in life struggled really bad with mental health, depression. Look at Robin Williams,
Mm-hmm.
one of the funniest people, and I remember when he passed away. That hit me hard, just because he's so funny, and to learn he died because suicide because he was literally facing a really bad depression. So it hits everyone. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how many friends you have. It's really not something you can control. It's just something you can learn tools to work through.
Yeah, yeah. You're always going to get hit with something that makes you feel, and I don't want to just use the words depressed because I don't feel now I necessarily get depressed, but there's some days where I feel like maybe things are a little bit more difficult to navigate, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So whether it be a frustration that builds or a sadness that builds, those things are going to come at you in life no matter what.
Yes.
And I want to be clear, that's not me saying that depression isn't real. It's just a word that I try not to use because I feel that subconsciously we can almost make things worse for ourselves if we just bury deep down into it and kind of sit in that pocket of what's making us frustrated, what's making us upset. I think that's kind of when it turns to depression. And there are ways that have worked for me, and I'm sure millions of other people have different things that work for them. But I think that being open about what has affected us negatively, mentally, emotionally, all those things that weigh on your mental health, I think will be a big avenue for people to kind of hopefully even feel more comfortable themselves discussing it.
I agree 100%. And then I feel like we should start every show up off with just, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline phone number, which is
Good
one eight
call.
hundred 273 8255. There's also a crisis text line. If you're feeling you're in a crisis, but some people when they're going through struggles, they don't want to talk to anyone, but they can text. If that's you, text home HOME to 741 741, and you'll be able to text back and forth with someone that can kind of talk you through what you're going through. So that's it's definitely important. But with that being said, how was your week?
You know what? My week has been all right. Still kind of trying to come out on the other side of the extended hospital stay. Still kind of banged up physically. And it's funny that you ask about that because I kind of realized something. I think everything that happened around going to the hospital, like hurting my neck in December at my job, um, that not allowing me to be in the gym since December, which is a huge part of my life. Not wrestling, which is a huge part of my life. Being in the hospital away from my son and my daughter for 3 weeks. I think had it not been for the past, that would have been an extremely, I shouldn't say an extremely, much more extremely difficult for me, kind of had I not experienced other things in life. I think it allowed me to kind of find the good in everything that happens, and I think that's big. And I know that's easy to say, but I think as we especially go over today, but just as we continue this podcast, and we're hoping to do it twice weekly because I think people need a safe place to, whether it's just hearing us or chiming in the chat, or if people ever want to join, just something that we can just openly discuss and not feel like we're being uh, crucified or criticized or whatever word you want to use for it by. And I think that helped because I was watching Raw on Monday and it was kind of a downer, and not because the product was bad, not because of anything, just knowing that I want to provide for my family, and the best way I can do that is wrestling, and everything that's happened is still just kind of put a hindrance on that right now. And as much as it sucks, I know that there's other avenues because I work tirelessly and effortlessly. Um, I shouldn't say effortlessly. What's a better word for that? Uh, Regardless, but I worked so hard to get to where I was with wrestling. It's the only real job I've ever had. And sometimes that weighs on you, but then you start to understand it's like it might take a while, but if I had the dedication and determination to push myself to that level when the numbers are not on your side as a professional wrestler, I think that kind of made me realize that no matter how you're feeling at a certain point, you can kind of think of positives that have happened, whether it be due to that situation, from that situation, and really from everything that happened. I met my wife, I have a daughter now. Um, I just, there's so many things that have come out of darkness that you can't really, it's hard to put myself in that mind frame to feel really down. In certain situations I might kind of not feel the greatest in that moment, but I'm so happy that now I'm past that to where it ruins an entire day or it ruins an entire week. So this week has been good because I think when that happened Monday, I kind of went back to what my old schedule was. So I'm back to, waking up, and even after I stretch out because the neck and the leg's still bad, but I can, just meditate a bit, pray, and read a book, and then I start the rest of my day. I'm only reading a couple pages a morning just to kind of get back in the routine of things that I found help. So that was this week was kind of a big eye opener. I think a lot of stress that was kind of weighing on my shoulders. I think I just kind of washed it away. I don't know how I washed it away. It was just a frame of mind thing, but I definitely feel much better now on a Thursday than I did Monday watching Raw. And that's not to say that like I was depressed or I had weird emotions or feelings. It was just you know what I mean, like one of
Yeah.
those days where it was like I'm watching something I normally really enjoy watching, but I wasn't enjoying it at all. And it was like, oh, maybe I'll have a drink or maybe I'll have something to eat. And like that just wasn't tasting how you wanted it to taste. It was just one of those moments for like a couple, maybe an hour or so. And then I just kind of snapped out of it and uh, went and had dinner at my wife's family's house because that's what we do on Mondays and Fridays. And I kind of just snapped out of it, you know, looked at my wife, looked at my daughter. So this week's been really good. Now the big question is, what about your week? Because I know that somebody had a big date. It even looks like you got a haircut for that date, didn't you?
I got my hair cut before.
Oh yeah, but you got the haircut for the date.
No, I got my hair cut. I think before the last CIW show, actually.
I don't know, man. It looks different than last time I saw you.
Well,
So
I
maybe I
usually wear a
haven't.
hat. I
That's
usually wear a
fair. Yeah,
hat
okay, that's fair
because
too.
I'm got the Elgin special going on top. So I've been wearing a hat to kind of cover it
Hey,
up.
man. I lasted to 24. My dad only lasted to 22. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah, I beat my dad at. My dad lasted to maybe his late 20s. I've made it to at least 38. So,
So what's fun? What I find weird about that is forever. I even when I had long hair when like I first started wrestling,
hmm
it would part right where my bald spot started.
yeah,
And then here I was fine. But as soon as I started shaving my head, then this started receding too. It was just right here, like right at the crown of my head. Even when I had the long hair and I'd put it up, if the hair hung, you could see where it was kind of gonna go bald. Like I had that hairline right there. But the front was pretty good. Once I started shaving,
the
it
actually
went to crap.
the first time I realized that I was developing a bald spot up top was when I was working in radio and we were doing a show for Sirius XM, and we were using the studio at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
Okay.
they have cameras all over the studio, so you can live broadcast out of that
Oh,
stuff too.
you got a above
There was
view on your
one
dome.
right above my head, and I before about probably about an hour before we go on, we're doing our equipment check and everything, and I'm checking the cameras, and I look and I'm like, what the? Where did that come from? Like, why
Right.
is no one told? I felt like Stevie Wonder right there, because damn well, Steve ain't no one told Stevie Wonder what his hair looks like
Yeah, maybe
for
not.
him to walk around like he walks around with braids on the side, and
But see, you say that, but then there is people, and I'm not saying anything other than his hair. But Hulk Hogan's walked around with that hair for a long time,
that is
brother.
true. That
He's
is
got
true.
he's had the Predator cut since before Predator was cool, right?
That is true, but I don't know. Something about Stevie Wonder, it just I don't know. But hey, Stevie don't see nothing wrong with it, so I guess I can't
Yeah,
either.
that's right.
But yeah, I noticed it. I'm like, what the hell? So I went up to the gift shop in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I spent like $50 on a hat that's probably worth like $10. But I needed one because I couldn't go on the show with my
Right.
big ball.
Yeah.
Especially the entertainment business. It is, as you know, with wrestling, it's such a very look based business.
Yeah, that's something that I think I'm gonna cover. We got to cover it at some point
Oh
because there's
yeah,
a lot of things in wrestling that I think can be a trap for mental health, especially for guys. For women too. Don't get me wrong. Um, but I think it's a little bit less. From the outside looking in, I see less and less people commenting negatively about females now. I do see them unfortunately still commenting sexually, which is a whole different topic. But I think the guys right now are at an all time high of kind of being criticized for their bodies or looks or hair or whatever, especially when it comes to wrestling. And there's a flip side of that. So I think that's going to be an interesting discussion at some point because even though this is about men's mental health and mental health as a whole, like we've said multiple times, I'm sure that we are going to attract some wrestlers. So there might be
oh yeah.
some wrestling within the world of men's mental health that we discuss on this podcast. But yeah, man, body dysmorphia is a real thing for sure.
Well, I know. I'm pretty sure I've shown you pictures of when I was in my 20s, like real skinny. Really, I was decently put together, not muscular, but skinny, and then I had some health issues, and now I ballooned up like I have, and like it took a lot when I first ballooned up. Like it put me in a really bad space, especially at the time being stand up comedy,
Yeah.
doing radio. Like I was constantly in the public eye, and I was really like I was wearing really loose clothing. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
very self conscious about how I looked. I didn't want like I would book less stand up comedy dates just because I didn't want to go in front of people. Just it's a hell of a Joan Rivers said it. Someone asked, why do you get all these plastic surgeries and stuff like that, and she's like, it's part of the bit. Like it's a shitty business. You
Yeah.
gotta look good. They push you to look good, no matter what the consequences or anything like that. And that's just
Dude,
entertainment in general.
you couldn't have said it better because, like, God, I'm probably about 40, 45 pounds overweight right now.
Mhm.
Not being able to work out, like, not even do cardio since December because my neck has been so bad. And then the blood clots in the leg, like,
Yeah.
I'm praying that my doctor's appointment next week is something that's like, hey, you can do a little bit of movement now because I don't want to permanently damage myself, not even just for the prospect of getting back to high level wrestling, but the prospect of my children growing up. Jax is 9, so in a few years he might start getting into sports, and I'd love to be able to be very active with him. Of course, I'm going to be active, but just everything that happened and the aches and pains, you only have a limited time frame to really be super active until you start to get sore, fatigue kicks in.
Oh,
And my daughter is only 6 months old, so it's like, dang, there's a long road ahead. So I got to really keep myself kind of in the best condition possible. And the neck being damaged in December at work, and just the blood clots, which of course happened because I was immobile, and the trauma of the neck injury in December. So it's like all part and parcel. And like I said, I feel that at a different point in life, I think this would have been really crushing for me mentally and
yes.
emotionally, to not, even though I'm not wrestling at the level I was, and we all know why, and hopefully that gets sorted as we discuss things. And my wife even brought it up, when we announced this podcast, and all the other stuff's out there. Let's hope that people pay attention. But regardless of that, it's just like, not even being able to wrestle once in a while is kind of making me not be able to watch wrestling
Hmm.
as a fan. And I don't like that because I enjoy watching wrestling as a fan. And I think sitting back, like, it's not that I'm overly critical. It's just like one thing that could be forgiven and be like, I wish it could have been done this. It kind of sits wrong with me. And I don't know why. That's definitely a fault within myself that I have to find that reason for. Because there's been times where we've discussed like watching something, whether it be Dynamite or SmackDown or Raw or a PLE or pay per view, whatever you want to call them. It's like I love watching it. I'm just such a huge fan, and for whatever reason, I think this week it just kind of fatigued me that I haven't been able to go to the gym. I'm gaining a little bit of weight. I'm not wrestling, and I'm not wrestling at the level I wanted to before the injury, which kind of sucked. And it's like it all comes to a head, and then I look at my wife and I look at my kids, and it's kind of okay. We're figuring something out because
Yes.
I really think that we can reach a lot of people here. I'm writing a book, and I think there's other avenues for me to help people because I think one of the biggest things I've learned, especially this week, I think it was always there, and I'm sure you could agree. Sometimes there's like this lingering this lingering statement about yourself that you kind of can't uncover, and there's always, just every time you get close to uncovering it, there's like a little dust there. And
Yes.
I think why I loved being a father so much was the same reason I loved being a teacher when I ran the wrestling dojo or doing CIW and being able to help people in the back. It's like I take great pride in being able to teach somebody and them learn and utilize it for their own future. Like that's very, I really enjoy that. I enjoy being a coach. I enjoy being a teacher, and having two young children. I think that's just like, that fills any void you could ever have, at least from my perspective, meaning I feel that one of the reasons why I was put here was to like help people learn something new, whether that be about themselves, about pro wrestling, about life, whatever. But that is what I really not only cherish, but I feel I'm good at. I can find methods and ways and avenues to help people understand what I'm saying, not just hear what I'm saying.
So I have a question that
Yes.
just popped in my head when we were talking about this. Do you think you're at a point now, in personal life, to where if wrestling is something you don't get another opportunity in general, do you think you're at a good place in your life to where you can accept that and kind of move on from wrestling, or do you think it's always going to be a part of you that strives to be involved some way?
See, that's a really good question, and that's something I've asked myself. And it's like, I feel that it's definitely always going to be a struggle to not get to it. And why I say that is because it wasn't my doing
Hmm.
that put me in the situation not to be where I feel my talent should have me there. Now, if it was because I caused too much trouble or my talent wasn't as good as the other talent that were getting opportunities or a severe injury that prevented me from ever getting back, um, I would be more at peace, you know? I think the good thing is, even though I feel it's always going to be something that's kind of lingering, it's never going to be something that puts me in a mind frame that has me not being able to be Aaron Frobel, the father, the husband, the man, you know? I think before it wasn't necessarily just the wrestling, it was kind of a plethora of things, and that's kind of what I want to discuss today. Does that answer your question, or
No, yeah, no, that
yeah,
definitely.
I don't ever want to feel like I'm dancing around it. Like it's just it's such a big part of my life, you know. It's like losing it's generally like losing a loved one.
Hmm.
You know, people that I meet just at the gym or former friends I'm hung out with or whatever, you know, ex girlfriend's friends or ex spouse's friends. Oh, did you leave?
No, I'm here.
Oh, my computer. I'm just being goofy. Um, I if people didn't remember a name, I was always the wrestling guy. You know what I mean? It was almost an identity to me.
Hmm.
And losing that, I mean, it's been the longest relationship outside of my parents that I've ever had. So it's an unreal heartbreak. You're losing a piece of you, and then not only that, when you're losing the way that you provide for your family, which for me, you know, even my son's mom that I'm not with anymore, like if tomorrow WWE called me and said, hey, we don't give a shit, I see the proof, I see you're innocent, here's, you know, $500,000 a year, that money would be for everybody, you know. I'd want to help out my mom and dad back home. I'd want to help out, of course, my wife. We need more space in the house. I'd want to buy a new house. If my son's mom needed something, like I would help. It's never been solely about me, and I think that is kind of the hardest thing to deal with. It's like I could wrestle anytime I wanted, but it wouldn't be for the money that I would normally get. I would have to shoot my rate way down to get bookings all the time. But I'm not at a place physically where I can do that. And also, as a father, I can't justify leaving for a weekend when I don't have my son because then I'm taking a weekend out for my daughter for dropping my rate to this $100 or $150 that people are making. I never made that little since the early 2000s, you know. I've been making a lot more money at that for that. And it's not that I don't love the business, it's that I'm 38. You know, I'm awaiting neck surgery. I just had these blood clots that were so bad I could have lost my leg. I can't justify that anymore because I have other responsibilities. So what if I drastically get hurt and then the hospital bills pile up? Yes, I have insurance outside of that. What if my car breaks down and I don't get to work or I don't get back in time for my wife to go to work or whatever it may be? Like those are things that I now have to deem what's most important. And when it's not doing something to pay my bills. You know, the bookings I do, I make the extra money I need, and that's great. But it's like Some of these other promotions that want to book me, oh, can you come in for $100? Can you come in for $150? It's like I can't. You know, I understand that you believe that social media runs the wrestling world, and because you book me and a couple people online are gonna shit on me. It's not the case, because any show I've ever went to, I've purposely asked, and I have the company's names of everywhere I've worked for since 2020, and I always ask, was your audience up or down? And it's been up every single time. My merch sales at these shows always good, so it doesn't really hurt the shows. It just takes a certain type of person to say, you know what, I'm going to use Michael Elgin. He's never done me wrong. He's a good talent. I'm going to bring him in, do a seminar, whatever it may be. So it's like, it's just such a huge part, but get I have to get to the point where, unless it's feeding my family and allowing me to give them a better life, then it's got to be on the back burner, which sucks because I love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. I think I've been a big help with people even before all the crap and coming to CIW. Like, I've always been somebody who's tried to help others get better. I mean, I was one of the few people that, when they first started, that were on team Josh Alexander and Ethan Page, because I saw something and they were starting around the same age. I saw that they liked the same wrestling I did. They had the same drive I did. And sometimes in life, but especially in wrestling, somebody that's already been through a door that can maybe at least get you to be able to knock without being shot at is a good thing in pro wrestling. So I always tried to do that for people. And it's just like, if that's not what people do for me now that I'm out, then they weren't really my friends. So if they weren't really my friends, why do I have to fight to be around these people that could have spoke up when I did so much for them? And so it becomes easier as it goes, but it's definitely going to be always one of those things. It's like the real emotion of CM Punk being on TV and breaking down because he has the main event at WrestleMania. It's like, well, guess what? He wasn't the only one with that dream. I had a dream of main eventing WrestleMania too. And I was trying to play my career to where I would go into WWE and they would consider me a main eventer, because I know, had I went there when they first showed interest in 2010, I would have been nowhere near main eventer. But I put in my work, and I've shown that I can work with all the top guys, and then everything happens. So it's always going to be something that I don't know that it will ever be something that makes me really, really sad or depressed or anything like that. But it would always be like, man, what if? Like, that's the one what if that I think is going to be remaining, because who knows? As I said, maybe everything opens up. Maybe people start paying attention. Maybe those things change, and maybe they don't. I don't know. I've sent emails to WWE. Don't always hear back, and when I do hear back, it's always the same thing. So unless everybody on social media is going to change, I got to come to the realization that it's going to be very difficult to get to that point. And am I willing to, or do I have the time to put that effort in? And I'm definitely willing to, but I don't know I have the time unless I prioritize it over other things. And the way I was treated on the way out, man, I don't think I can ever prioritize it over the most important things in my life anymore.
Oh, I definitely. And it's crazy, as the older you get, the more priorities change and what's important, changes. But I know we have a topic to get into, but I do. So I was thinking while you were talking, and I thought about a question that I've never heard you ask before, um, and it just popped in my head with everything that went down in 2020, and the speaking out movement and all that, and how you kind of got lumped in with everyone else that did some horrendous things,
Right.
and you got lumped into that, on some stuff that, you know really, even the accusations themselves, a lot of them didn't make sense, but regardless, do you in any way think there's anything you could have done differently that could have changed the outcome, whether it's before speaking out happened? Is there anything that you feel like you may have done wrong to set yourself up to be an easy target?
So I think I was an easy target, one, because of the story I said in the Kevin Steen show.
Hmm.
So I think that kind of was the first downfall. And I've covered that a bunch of time. I joked about a story, and let me clear this up right now. I've cleared it up a bunch of times, but people always still bring it up. So the actual thing that happened is myself and two other wrestlers picked up three girls from a bar. Yes, one was married, but the girl that was married, her husband, they were swingers, and he said, make sure my wife has a good night tonight before he left. So myself and two other wrestlers took these three girls back to our hotel. It was a kind of night. There was a dare on the way up, which I took as a joke, and we all kind of took as a joke. Somebody said, I dare nobody could urinate on a woman in the heat of passion. Well, after everything that happened in the room, one of the wrestlers and one of the girls went into the shower, and that wrestler peed on her in the shower and then yelled out, "Hey, tell so and so he owes me my $50 US." Could have been 100, I forget now. Because that was the real part of the story. The real part of the story was there was a bet on the drive to Timmins, Ontario. I don't think anybody took it seriously. But regardless, so that happened. Then we joked, and then I changed the story. And yes, it was a different time. This is not an excuse. But in 2013, just the climate itself was so much different. I didn't look at how this story would upset anybody or, maybe cause people to be like, oh my God, this happened to me and it's a trigger. Like at that time, those weren't things that I ever thought about. And maybe I wish I would have back then, but I just did not think about it. I thought, oh, I'm Michael Elgin. That's not my real name. This is pro wrestling. Pro wrestling isn't real. I can tell this story on this shoot interview and it will be used to sell DVDs, which after that, many people got me signed the DVDs, said it was one of the funniest stories they ever heard. And now looking back at it and even thinking that I told that story, like I'm disgusted by it for real. Like it's not something that I find amusing. And it's not just now that I have a daughter. It was well before that. I've been saying this for years. But I looked at, okay, if I have to get popular, Cliff Compton, who is a great guy, got into Ring of Honor after being Deuce and Dominoes in WWE, which is not saying anything bad about his talent. But it's like, think about it. Would you ever have thought Deuce or Domino would be in Ring of Honor?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like him kind of getting popular, saying outlandish things, got him opportunities. So it's like you look at it like that, and you look at it from a lens. 2013, we're talking 12 years ago. So, I was 26 years old, looked at the world differently, thought about things differently. And I think from that, and this is going to kind of go into the main subject, I wish that I had been around more people who truly followed the word of the Bible. And this isn't to preach to anybody that you have to be religious, that you have to believe in God. Everybody's willing to do what they want. But I think the biggest thing, it's like not having sexual relations with somebody unless you want to procreate, or at least unless you're willing to procreate with them, I think would have saved a lot of headaches because these girls came out of the woodworks after I had been separated and then started going through a divorce. Um, I saw them, told them, I can't have anything serious with you. I just got out of divorce. I'm focusing on my career. I'm focusing on my son. And then they say that's okay. And then they change from being okay with that to not okay with that. And then I break up with them. And some of them I wasn't honest with. And saying I wasn't honest with it, I wasn't honest with the reason why I was ending it. Some of them I told, hey, I'm going to go back with my ex wife or whatever. So I definitely tried to lie to spare. I don't know. And that's something that I'm going to talk about later because I think the main topic of this podcast is going to be super important. But just putting myself in those situations, of course, putting yourself in those situations, you don't realize that it could open up the possibility to lie about something that happened between you. But I think, like, one, that story, I wish I'd have been maybe more mature and thought more about what the future held when I did the Steen podcast. And then when I was going through the separation in 2019 and eventually getting divorced in 2020, I think I wish I had have kind of sat back and realized, like, intimacy isn't as important as I think we put on it. And not only that, I think I just, again, no excuses. I've learned from this, but me and you are the same age. We grew up in a highly
Oh yeah.
sexualized just world, you know?
I
I
mean,
mean, American Pie, the Attitude
I was gonna
Era.
say, look at the Attitude Era
Yeah, you know,
alone.
it's
I
just
mean,
unfortunately, porno being more accessible than any time, what was it? Napster came out, people were downloading porn on that for the first time. Like, you know what I mean? Internet was really popularized while we were kids. So it's
I
like
mean,
we just got this stuff put in front of us, and I think we put a more emphasis on that. So I think that I wish that I could have realized that those things were fake, and I think people are getting caught up with that on TikTok now. It's like, oh, look at this couple did this, and it's like, yeah, but they rehearsed that. Like these people are trying to be content
ooh,
creators. They don't just open up a camera and film this thing off of nothing. Bloopers, sure, but a whole little scene, like, come on, man, this stuff doesn't happen. It's all a routine. And I think if I had have even been told, or I just had have had that foreknowledge that, hey, what I'm watching is all entertainment purposes.
mhm.
And had I thought, or had people in my life that were more, and I had people in my life that were religious, but not necessarily like follow God's word religious. You know what I mean? Went to church on Sundays and prayed and stuff. But I think when you change the way that you live, it's really good. And that's why I say I'm not trying to preach religion to anybody. The next topic we do discuss, I'm going to talk about my faith, but that's not putting faith on anybody else. That's not saying that I hate anybody out there that's, you know, gay or trans or a different race. None of that. I'm just saying, and it'll be others a further understanding. I think even trying to live your life in a way that makes you feel like you're doing right by everybody, you start to do right by everybody. So I really think that I wish I had have kind of maybe more so worried about other things outside of that. Because at the time, I was okay going through the divorce, and it's not to rag on anybody. I was unhappy myself. I'm sure my partner was unhappy. Because once one person gets unhappy and there's no discussion, then the other person gets unhappy, right? So you got to be good communicators, and sometimes it's hard to communicate, especially as men. And I think it was just a perfect storm. So I wish that I'd put more emphasis on how can I make other aspects of my life better. But at the time, I thought they were great. I was happy wrestling. I had a beautiful son. Yes, I was getting divorced, but I was looking at a home. Like things were going okay, and I wish that I had to maybe put more focus on other avenues. Then hey, it'd be nice to have a girl around, and then even telling them, hey, I don't want anything serious. I shouldn't have been looking. If I wasn't ready for something serious, and that's just me now. And I'm not judging anybody who goes out and enjoys company of multiple people or likes to just play the game and play the field. Like it's okay. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying for me, I think those were where I really went awry, and I'm glad now that my view on all that's different. Even though I didn't do anything wrong per se. I think if I had had a better mindset during those times, that I would have stopped those people from coming into my vicinity, and I wouldn't have let that negative energy around me. And I hope even the people who did cause me great harm, and we're gonna get into that soon. But I don't even wish them ill will. I just hope that they realize the error in their ways and they correct it. Because if you keep going through life like that, like it's gonna catch up with you. And I don't want that to happen to anybody. I think that taking a real hard look at yourself and realizing your own issues within whatever you've created is super important. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's rough, and that's kind of a good interlude into our next thing. But you have dodged the question about your week and your date,
Oh,
so what the
oh.
fuck's going on?
So I mean, it was fine. It's just this is and we're obviously we will one day have a complete episode just talking about divorces,
Yeah.
because me and you have both gone through them,
Yep.
and I think we can both attest to the fact that they are very mentally draining. Um, but I mean, this is like my first kind of real date since I've been divorced. I've been divorced. It'll be 2 years in October. But this is kind of like my first real date because it's just weird because the dating scene it's very much this generation or this kind of era we're in. It feels very much like it's a hookup culture more
Yep.
than especially for gay people like myself going on some of these dating apps like Grinder or whatever. Like they're not dating apps. They're called
So
dating apps.
here's a question. Is there a specific gay dating app, or is it better to go to like I don't know all of them. Tinder, that was probably the only real one. Is it what, Bumble?
I
Right?
think
That was
Bumble's
one.
one.
Is it sites like that? Is that better as a gay guy to go in there and look for guys, or is it sites like you're saying, like Grinder, that are the best options to actually meet men?
It depends what you're looking for. Now, if
Okay,
you're looking for just hookups and you're looking, just to go out and have fun and don't want nothing serious, Grinder, all the gay dating apps are the best ones to use because that's what they are. It's just very
so when they're like, but there's no like, I don't want to say it and seem weird, but there's no like gay Tinder. Like the dating apps are kind of mostly centered around hookup, or is that just how they become, or what do
that's
you
just
think?
kind of how they become. Now, Tinder is both. So Tinder actually,
Right? Yeah, I know you
yeah.
can get, but I was wondering if there was a strictly like, you know,
Oh no,
I've been on
no,
Tinder
it's
before, so
all
I know it's like, what are you looking for, men or
yeah,
women, or but
yeah.
like, is there any? Would you say
Not
gay
really.
dating apps like that, or do they all kind of turn to a hookup culture because
Now it's
just the
all
nature of things? Yeah.
maybe farmersmeat.com. I don't know if that's no, yeah, like they've all, and that's just kind of, and I get it. Like I get it because gay culture has been, and this is a big thing in the '80s with among homosexuals was they didn't want monogamy because they felt like that was putting them, making them like straight people.
Okay. I
So
never knew that, so that's interesting.
yes,
I'm glad that we're having this discussion. I didn't know that was something that was.
oh yes,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
and I think that's carried over. I think this younger generation has it right though, with gay marriage becoming legal, and I see a lot of younger people actually getting into relationships, getting
That's
married.
good.
But kind of my generation, which was that in between generation of the '80s and the early 2000s, are kind of still stuck in that hookup, but also want to be in relationships, but also want to you have open relationships. Like it's a lot, and it's hard to kind of navigate through that. Especially I'm someone that now don't get me wrong. During my marriage, and I regret this a lot, I cheated a lot during my marriage, a lot. I was very much, just yeah, it was bad, and and I regret that, and I
Did you? Was it just like so? I always kind of fought with this because I flirted a lot while I was married.
hmm
I didn't cheat, but when we got separated, I did started seeing girls, and some of those girls I may have flirted with while I was taken.
right,
Um, Mostly not even in person. You know, like when I was in person, I tried to be charming. Um, but I would, if I got sent a message here or there, I'd maybe flirt back or whatever. And that was something that I didn't at the time consider cheating. But then, my ex had saw some messages and I explained it to her. I said, even ask the girls if we hooked up, like, please do. And she did and realized it didn't. And forever, I think I still have it on one of my phones. I took the screenshots just in case, she tried to say something else. Um, but I considered that cheating. So were you just specifically cheating for like was it? Because because I've cheated in the past, just not on my ex-wife and not on my current wife. Like before I met my wife, I want to preface this so I don't sound like I'm just trying to be a goody two shoes. Like before I met my first wife, listen, I definitely had cheated on people. I know that the people say once a cheater, always a cheater. No, because you mature and you realize that the pain that cheating actually does.
Yes.
And I think when you're younger, you don't understand. When you start dating people in high school and you start being intimate with people, I think you chase that rather than just a soul relationship. And at the time, you don't really understand the negative effects you're having on others. And we're going to cover this today, but yourselves too. I think,
Yeah.
especially as men, we feel that it has no kind of detriment to us. And I believe that it does. And as I said, we'll talk about that later.
I
Um,
I think of the saying, "Hurt people hurt people."
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So
But back to what we were saying about the
yeah,
cheating, just before we get too far out of it, because I know mostly it's going to be my fault. Because one thing goes, and then it just
yeah,
when I talk about something that I'm passionate about, we've discussed this with wrestling. It just can go in a million different ways.
mhm,
But so like I felt during my last marriage, I flirted way too much, and
yeah.
at the time I didn't consider that cheating. Um, and then when I first got separated, I wasn't just craving like intimacy. I was craving if I wasn't just craving physical intimacy. I was craving going out for dinner with somebody and them not being able to take their eyes off me, or going out and having ice cream and holding hands walking in the park, like going to a movie and being all up on each other, not making out or anything, but just like snuggled up in the
You
movie
want the
theater.
romance.
Yeah, like and that sounds weird because I think when especially females look at males, it's always about like, oh, they just want sex. And like, no, I want dates. I want
Hmm.
yes, of course, sex is part of it, especially if you're entering a monogamous relationship. Like it's clearly something that at least is a desire. And if you're choosing to spend your life with somebody, then I'm not saying you have to have sex every time your partner wants to, but not taking that away, like what is that going to lead to? That's going to lead to friction. And then when we talk about people not having good communication and then there's no communication about it, like I know I've been in a situation where I've tried to communicate about it, and by the end of those communications, a month, as a matter of fact, once a week, it finally got switched around to where it was my fault, and that's why we got separated. And it was like, even sometimes having those discussions of what you need can be difficult. So, two questions. Was it mostly just physically cheating? Why did you feel you did that physically cheating? And then the second question I would say was, do you find as a gay man it's still very difficult to open up and express your emotions and feelings towards your partner, even though they're also a man?
So the first one was, yeah. So I was kind of a more of a. It's hard to explain because like you have people that just go and physically cheat. They just go
Right.
have sex. They don't build any type of relationship outside of the sex. I was very much a, like, mentally and physically cheat. Like mentally, I would cheat, in the beginning, and then it would lead to physical. Because I'm very much, and I've always been this way. I'm an emotionally needy person.
Okay.
But at the same time, and like you were talking about asking, but I find it hard to share my emotions.
All right.
So, guys, girls, whatever type of relationships I've been in, whether it be friendships or, lovers or whatever, I've always had trouble opening up and saying, "Hey, this is how I feel." And I think that's a big part of why my marriage the downfall of my marriage, besides, obviously the cheating played a big part. But then we both, not to undermine what I did, we both were very much active outside of
Right.
our marriage. Um, but I was never able to communicate, and I'm very much of a holder in until I get to the point, and then it just all comes out.
So do you feel like that is just So that's good because this is going to really open up for the rest of today's podcast for real. Like this is all kind of fallen part and parcel with it. It's good how, we talked of course about a couple things. I don't want to act like we didn't have a little bit of a game plan.
Right.
We did, but as for foremost, we just kind of let it flow because I think that's something that men kind of pride themselves on a little bit is just being in a fun, goofy situation, which is going to go to TV shows, which I think I'm going to cover after the main topic today. Um, See, I ramble too much sometimes. So, do you feel that you are afraid to open up to anyone because of just being a man and kind of how that has been portrayed throughout your life, or what makes you believe that you are unopened of to open up?
Honestly, I believe it was, kind of how I grew up.
Okay.
I grew up with a very, strict, manly my real dad was in and out of the picture, because of drugs and stuff. Him and my mom separated not long after I was born, and she got remarried. So the guy I grew up calling dad was actually my stepdad.
Okay.
But he was one of those really like very macho, the toxic kind of masculinity. I think is a word that people use these days. But he made me play football. He made me play baseball. Like I had to do men's sports, and I had to, play sports, and I had to watch sports, and I shouldn't be watching certain TV shows because that's a woman's show or whatever. Like he very much pushed that on me,
Okay.
and emotions weren't something you can talk about
Right.
because men do not have emotions. They grunt, they drink, they go work their 8-hour construction job, they come home, they eat dinner, they go to bed. That's what a man does. There's no time to talk. And I think that's kind of how I was raised, and even my mom. I I was the baby.
Right.
By the time I came around, I feel like my mom was kind of just tired of being a parent, which sucks. But my brother and my sister are significantly older than me. And then, when I was about 7 or 8, my mom and my stepdad divorced. She married her third husband. And definitely at that time, I felt like I was the lowest priority to her.
Mm-hmm.
Her new husband took priority over everything. My sister and my brother were both over. They both had license. They could come and go as they wanted. Like they were basically adults at that time.
Right.
I was kind of stuck there alone, but my mom was. I feel like, and I love my mom to death. Don't get me wrong, and our relationship has gotten better over probably the last 5 or so years. But she was just. I feel like she was tired of being a mom by the time I came around.
Yeah.
And my mom also, she owned a daycare, so she was around kids all day long. I'll tell you what, it really bothered me. And I'm gonna try not to get emotional talking about this because,
No, it's
um,
okay to. That's the point of this
oh
podcast.
yeah, yeah. But and that's kind of another thing that bothered me growing up, and I feel like something that maybe caused me to shut in was I saw a lot of these, kids within her daycare that were getting the love and affection from her that
Right.
I wasn't getting. And as a kid, that's a mind fuck as a kid.
I have no
Um,
doubt, man.
and so like it was very much closed in my own. Wrestling was very much my escape, which is why
Yeah.
I was because I could live out. I watch wrestling and I forget about everything, and like I could live out my fucking dream world through fucking pro wrestling. Um, and then so it's I one thing that still haunts me to this day, and I remember when I was probably about 17 or 18, I told my mom this, and she blew it off as if it wasn't no big deal. I actually wrote my mom a very long letter, just kind of letting her know about certain things that bother me. I've been on my own since I was 16.
Okay.
I moved out of my mom's house when I was 16. I stayed with friends for a while. Kind of couch surfed when I was 16. I had a job and everything, working at McDonald's because what teenager doesn't work at McDonald's to their first job?
You know
Um,
what? I got through life without ever working at
hey,
McDonald's.
hey, there's still time. Um, I'm gonna get you an application when I'm in town. Um, but yeah, it's just I've been on my own since I was 16. I basically been surviving since I was 16. I come obviously I've come a long fucking way. Um, but I wrote her a long letter when I was probably about 16, 17. One of the things that bothered me, and it still bothers me to this day, I think, and she won't acknowledge it, or even when I put in a letter, she kind of act like I was overreacting. When I was, I want to say 13, 12 or 13, I was in a school play.
Mm-hmm.
On my birthday, this was a school Christmas play. On my birthday, I was in a school play. I was one of the main characters, and I love entertaining, acting, writing, wrestling.
Right.
I love being an entertainer. So I was in the school play, and she didn't come on my birthday. She did not come because her and my stepdad decided to go camping that weekend. And like as a kid, that crushed me.
Yeah, I
You
can. Yeah,
know,
man.
it still bothers me. And I brought it up to her that one time in that letter, and she really blew it up. Like I was just you know making a big deal out of nothing, but it was a big fucking deal to me.
Yeah.
And I think that really set me up to kind of not only close in my emotions, but um, it set me up to expect to be let down by everyone in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel that way. Everything I do, I'm always in the back of my mind, I'm always waiting for, the pin to drop. And, I feel like every friendship I've had a falling out over something stupid, but in my mind, I'm emotionally already thinking that we're gonna fall out at some point, and
Right.
I'm setting myself up for that failure. Every time,
So do you think you like create those situations because your mind frame's already thinking that it's going to end negatively?
I don't think sometimes yes.
Okay.
I think what I mostly do though is I let any minor situation blow up into that bigger situation that will end a relationship, a friendship, whatever.
So here's a question because this is going to play well into later. Um, do you think that that little situation blows up, or do you think that you've had far too many of those little situations that you just kind of washed your hands as soon as those little situations show up?
Well, I think what it is I hold everything in to where there's multiple little
Right. Yep.
situations,
Yep.
and I let it turn
Yep.
into and then make it a big situation and say, you know
So
what,
it's
I'm done.
it's the accumulative kind of straw that broke the
Yes,
camel's back. Yeah.
yes.
Okay. That's what I thought too. That I think that's pretty standard for males. And multiple reasons. Like you said that how why you felt kind of you couldn't express yourself and because you had somebody demanding. But I think that's not just our parents. I think that's society that kind of taught men. I really think it's a dual thing. I mean, some of my favorite lines from movies, and not saying that there's this weird thing. Yes, it's entertainment, but as a child, I don't think you understand the gigantic difference between entertainment and real life.
Mhm.
Uh, Predator. Mac, you're bleeding, not my blood.
Yeah.
Like I don't got time to bleed. Like all these sayings we kind of grew up on and TV shows and especially as boys, like there was kind of like you're saying, your stepfather wanted you to play manly stuff. I'm sure me and you, same age, so you probably, you're told you had to watch Rocky. You were told you had to
Mhm.
watch Over the Top. You
Oh
were
yeah.
told you had to watch, Suburban or no Commando and Predator and all these Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. It's just
Yes.
like we kind of grew up to where like we had good idols, meaning the men had good qualities, but we never understood that there was more beyond those good qualities. We
Yep.
didn't understand just as much as him. Like now you hear, Sylvester Stallone was broke as shit, had to write his own script and force people to let him act into it. Like he took that drive and that determination and he bet on himself. And I think that's something that we're always told we can become anything we want to become if we work hard enough, but I don't think and I think as we progress in age, it's getting more and more difficult. Nobody's being taught how to work for those things anymore. You know? um, so many people are trying to be the next streamer, and that's fine. It's great to make your money that way, but we're not being taught to really deal with the difficulties of life, which is why I think men's mental health is in such shambles. It's like you have to understand once you learn that, nothing's smooth sailing in life, then you're kind of you're at level one. Nothing's gonna go perfect. That's like level one, and
Mhm.
then it goes further. It's like not only does nothing go perfect, nothing comes easy, and when it comes easy, you got to second guess it. you
Yeah.
know, like really. And I think those are things that are not taught to men. And talking about that hospital stay and just being off work, I've had a lot of time to watch a lot of TV, and I've watched so many TV shows. And I'm not saying there's some huge conspiracy with Hollywood, but there's a real big topic of like you said earlier, the term toxic masculinity and the debate of why it's so dangerous. Like, not that I'm not gonna sit here and say a show made me mad. Adolescence, I watched it. I thought, okay, I get it. But then seeing the posts on social media, like the UK is going to use it as a tool to help men not be toxic in their masculinity and stuff, it's like, look, that's probably not the exact way something's going to happen, number one. Number two, it's like we got to treat our boys how to deal with, and girls too, how to deal with somebody saying those negative things. How do you get out of that rather than reacting violently or physically or even yelling? I think it's finding a way to know that when somebody is directing something at you, that it's a lot, it's coming from a place from pain from them too, or they're just trying to show off, or like I said, they're trying to deal with their own inadequacies, so they're not being honest about who you are or what you represent. And I think that's a topic we need to discuss with young boys, not the don't do this and don't do that. Yes, that's great, but there also has to be a way to deal with those things, not just to not be a certain way or not think a certain way. Well, how are we supposed to think? How are we supposed to act? Children are our future, and men, as we get older and we don't teach ourselves, then we have children and we don't teach our children, and it's an ongoing cycle. So that's why I said this entire thing is for younger men, middle-aged men, older men, because there's a lot of topics that I think combined we've went through, and being straight and you being gay, I think that opens up a so much drastically bigger kind of circumference of topics we can not only discuss, but we can get to learn about. Like, that's why I'm asking so many questions when you were talking about your things, is because I don't know as a straight man how you as a gay man interpret those things that happen in life or the reasons behind it, because they may be different. But all I'm hearing is I'm straight and you're gay, and we're dealing with the same issues for the same
Yeah.
reasons because we're men, And I think people, and then at a whole, there's probably some women that might come across this and go, "Well, I've dealt with some of those things too." Well, we're all human, and we all have very similar things we have to deal with, and we're not being properly armored or properly, maybe not armored, but we're not being given all the tools we need to succeed through these hard times, and that's why I think we got to do this.
And you know what's crazy? And I talked kind of about growing up and like how my dad kind of pushed all that on me, but even recently, like I found myself having that same mindset. And I think I think I even texted you this, probably about a month or 2 months ago. Um, and I was talking about gay people in wrestling
Yeah.
and how it bothers me that there's so many. Not that there's gay people in wrestling, obviously that doesn't bother me, but I was bothered by the fact that they were acting so feminine within their care, and that bothered me. And I even said that to you, like I hate that. I feel like, and you know, just recently, honestly, I started realizing within myself, like that was my own kind of toxic thinking, like thinking, all because I feel like I'm not feminine. I feel like I'm not feminine. Other people may be
Right.
like, yes, you are. I feel like I'm not, but Um, but that was kind of that same mindset of, well, all gay people should be like me and not, bring attention to themselves and not,
Right.
flaunt it out. And that's the wrong mindset. And that is, that is part of something that, could hold me back from, a lot of things in life, whether, relationship wise or even career advancement, to have that mindset that you're being a gay person the wrong way.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
doing it wrong. And it's no better than someone saying, "Oh, a Brandon Tate or an Andrew Tate saying, oh, you're being a man wrong. You're not being, whatever they call it, a macho man or a,
Yeah.
whatever that, you're a beta male." Fucking hate that word. Um, but I was doing the same thing internally.
Right.
That's not how you're supposed to be gay, and that's not right. That's not a right mindset to have. And once I came to that realization, like, I felt bad.
Yeah.
Like, I've literally been holding kind of, and I've said this before. Some of the most homophobic people are gay people,
Right.
and in a lot of ways, I have been one of those people. Like, if someone around me, if I go somewhere and someone around me is being a little too gay, I'm kind of like, let me distance myself from them. And that's, it's I don't know. It's funny because there's actually an episode of Will and Grace where the two main gay characters, Will and Jack. Jack is very feminine. Will is, very
Oh, I
hetero.
know. I've watched this
Oh,
show.
well, see, okay, so the episode where they go to the gym together, and and he's having a conversation with Grace, and he says he's too much of a fag.
Yeah.
And Jack hears him, and like that really, and like, but that's the mindset that a lot of gay people have,
Right. Yeah.
and it's that kind of internalized homophobia that we push onto other, that's another reason why the trans community has such a hard time, because there's a lot of gay people or lesbians that feel like the trans community isn't part of our community. They're kind of like gatekeeping the rainbow.
Yeah.
Like, you go over there and you be trans over there, and you're bringing too much negative attention, which I don't think is right.
Yeah, I mean, none of that. I think we all need a lot more self reflection, and even if we think we're giving each ourselves enough, that we're not.
Yeah.
That's why I've kind of changed my morning routine. I wake up, I pray, I meditate, and then I'll read a book, and I don't touch my phone before I do that. I got to shut out the outside world. Sometimes I'll look at social media, very rarely now. And not because it gets to me or triggers me. It's just it's so blatantly stupid. I feel it's become, like, really just not. And I mean stupid in the sense ignorant in the dictionary description of it, definition of it. It's just like people say such wild things, and it just I don't understand where it's coming from. But I think we should get into the meat of this. I think it's already been very good because it's just been a
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
But I thought how to start this series of podcasts. What would you say was the most mentally taxing situation you've ever been through? And how did you get through it? And how do you feel about it now? Like, are you fully through it? Is it still something you constantly have to work on, like alcoholism or anything like that? You know what I mean? Like, is the same type of thing where you're always going to have this negative kind of connotation around that subject? Or do you feel what you did to come out on the other side has kind of made you impervious to it?
I would say probably my dad dying
Okay.
was mentally the biggest struggle I've ever gone. I mean, literally, he was in the hospital for probably about 5 or 6 days before they decided it was time to, kind of pull the plug, take him off life support.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't know, my dad was a recovering drug addict. Spent most of my childhood deep in addiction, um, which is crazy because he spent my childhood deep in addiction. I've never seen my dad high. I've never seen my dad to where I could tell he was high, I should say.
Right.
My dad was he was a functioning drug addict, but nonetheless, he was a drug addict. Um, so he got clean later in life, um, and he got with a girl who didn't was not clean. Obviously, if you put a someone going through sobriety with someone that is deep in their own addiction, it's never gonna, it's there's gonna be a relapse.
Right.
And he relapsed and he did heroin with her. And heroin is probably the most dangerous drug in there is.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
hear.
and he OD'd, and she was so scared she did not call the cops for quite some time. And this was kind of before Narcan was such a regular thing like it is now, to where a drug, an OD isn't necessarily a life ending situation anymore.
Right.
But so he OD'd. He was in the hospital. I remember getting that call from my mom because it was like at 7:30 at night. I'm like, my mom never calls me this late. So I answered. She told me my dad's in the hospital. At this time, I was 20. I want to say I was 23, 24. I did not have my life together at all. I was living at like a boarding house where I rented a room. I didn't have a car. I was at a very bad point in my life to where I just kind of wanted to live and didn't have I didn't take no responsibility. I hustled and got money however I could. I made sure to have enough to, pay my monthly rent for my room, have my cigarettes, and like that's all I cared about. Um so I was also at a point in my life. So I went to the hospital. Or my mom came and picked me up from the boarding house, and I went to the hospital, and I did not leave that hospital for the 5 or 6 days, whatever it was, that he was still alive. Um, like I said, my didn't have the greatest relationship with my mom. My dad was someone I could always talk to.
Right.
My dad was the first person in my family I came out to, and he was completely understanding. I was his son. It didn't matter. He did not care. I'd always be his son, whatever. Like there's no prejudiced bone in his body. Um, so that hit me hard, and I'm still not over it. Like there's, especially around the anniversary of him, his dying, or around his birthday, it really hits me hard. Um, and there's still, it's been 11 years now. It'll be 11 years this November. Um, and I'd say in the last 11 years, there hasn't a day gone by that I haven't thought about him or missed him, or kind of had a moment there, like, damn, like that was my biggest supporter. That was my only person in my family ever come watch me wrestle.
Yeah.
That was my biggest supporter. Like he was had him and my grandpa both, who you know for my grandpa, and I feel really bad for my grandpa because he was still alive at the time. Like you should never have to bury one of your children.
Right. Yeah.
And but just yeah, I mean at 24, like not having my dad, who I've had my entire life, in some way or another. Not always there because of his struggles and addictions, but was always there when it counted.
Right.
Yeah, man, it was hard, and I still struggle with it. Um, I use that kind of had me put my life back on track and realize like fuck, you only have so much time on this planet. Like that made me really focus on.
Isn't it kind of crazy that the most difficult times in our lives are also so significant for the growth in our lives too?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like that's what made me go. Okay, I need to stop hustling because I was, that was my like thing. I didn't hold a job. I just hustled.
Hmm.
I do what I had to do. Stuff I'm not proud of. All type. Like I was in a very bad place.
Right.
Lucky that I was alive, honestly, at that time. Um, and it really put into perspective. Like I can't live this life anymore. And then I thought, the kind of the some of the stuff I did, like because of my actions and the stuff I was involved in, then this really hit me hard mentally, and it still does to this day. But I thought, because of what I was involved in, how many other people's parents have I had a hand in being where my dad was right now?
Right.
And that was a very, very big reality. Um, yeah, so it's like, that was kind of that was my life. I feel like is in two sections. It's with my dad and without my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and it's two totally different lives. Like people that knew me back then, if they saw me now, would it would blow their mind.
Right.
But I've completely left that world behind. Like I very rarely run into anyone from that part of my life,
Mm-hmm.
except for, my best friend who was there with me through it all. She stole my life. But outside that, like I was never a go to work, go work an 8-hour job, sit at a desk, talk to like that was not my life. So it's kind of crazy, but that's how I dealt with it. Was I got my own shit together, and I kind of found my own voice with doing comedy and like realizing like I'm the type of person that, and I realized this in the hospital. I've always like even in high school I was like that, but in the hospital I realized like I'm the guy that wants to take everyone's pain and turn it into laughter.
Yep.
I'm the guy that wants to, if I feel the mood has shifted and people are in a bad mood, I'm gonna crack a joke. I'm gonna say something to try to just. I like bringing happiness to people because that was the lowest moment of my life. Was sitting there where my dad, with my dad dying. That was the saddest I've ever been in my life, and like that, just a little bit of joy that I could find during that time made all the difference in the world, and that's what I realized I like to bring to other people.
So, would you say that even though it was the saddest point of your life, that now you're on the other side of it, and even though some days it's worse, you feel it kind of changed you for the better?
Yes.
Is there
Um,
anything else you think it kind of opened up from you that you think is a positive out of such a negative scenario?
I, beside, I mean, just being, I feel like just kind of learn to live through it is the biggest positive to come out of it.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
I think you found too, like, obviously a big positive is that you turned your life around,
yeah,
and kind of realizing that you aren't on this planet forever kind of made you go, maybe I got to do things different. So, like I'm saying, obviously the loss of a parent and especially somebody who you've expressed was, always there for you, the only one that watched you wrestle, like a big part of your life is gone. And as sad and as much as a void that might like leave, now at least you can look at your life and go, you know what, that was for you, Dad, and I hope you're proud, and I love and miss you type thing. So it's kind of turned it. Obviously there's going to be days like when you think about it and you say days it still affects you. It just kind of makes you upset that your dad's not here to see where you've kind of made it, or why do you think you still get upset about it?
I think that's the biggest thing. Like,
Yeah,
my dad has never seen me flourish in life.
right,
Like, my dad, the last my dad knew of me was just kind of some punk kid that was running the streets and getting in trouble and not applying himself to. And I was very much ending up on the road to be like my dad.
right,
And I think, and it's like, you talked about spirituality and that, like, I don't believe there's anything after this. So I feel like, when he left, that's what he had of me.
yeah,
And like that is a big thing that bothers me is he never knew that I was going to be okay. And I'm okay. It got better, and I'm okay. And that it really, I think that's the biggest thing that bothers me is that he never got to know. And like, if there's one thing I could tell my dad, it'd be like, hey, everything turned out okay.
And I know you might not believe in that, but I believe that there, and this is again not trying to turn you to a believer, not trying to turn anybody who may tune in this into a believer. But I think that was the importance of this podcast is we can kind of both discuss our similarities and our differences. I believe that he does know that you kind of turn it around, whether that's something you believe in or not. I think that there's a lot more going on in this world than we can ever fathom, and I think that it's interesting. I think that it's interesting, and I think that part of that spirituality comes from how such things can cause such trauma, and if we can get past it, I think it really helps us become a better version of ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, as again, just a different take, not trying to preach anybody to, hey, believe in what I believe in. That's just not who I am as a person. I think we can all get along and have different views at the same time.
Yes, I agree. We all have different stories. We all come from different places. We all have different beliefs, but it doesn't mean we can't all come together, and learn together and grow together.
Right.
You know.
That's the important. I think the grow together. So, and you said kind of, do you think it was a plethora of things that kind of built up to that point where when your father passed away, it kind of made it much darker, or was it that just what kind of would have put you in a mind frame all in its own, or did it kind of add to the point like we were talking with just in relationships? Sometimes it's the straw that broke the camel's back, and sometimes that straw carries a lot more weight than other straws that have kind of worn on you in the past way. Um, but do you think that it was just that, or was there kind of a compound of like kind of the situation where you said you were kind of just hustling and not living the best life? Do you think it was all just kind of wrapped in one when that hit you, and that made it such more, or brought it to a point that it was a lot more significant in the kind of frame of affecting your mental health negatively?
No, I think that me back then, my mindset back then, I was completely okay with the life I was living.
Okay.
I saw nothing wrong with it. It took my dad dying for that was like the
The eye
one
opener.
thing that was the one thing that made me go, this isn't what I want out of life. And because before then I was completely fine with it. Um, because I was
It,
surviving.
yeah, man, it's always crazy how such beautiful things can come from such terrible things sometimes, like you
Yeah.
said, that whole time you thought you were fine, you thought everything was fine, and then something happens that is a huge life shift, and wow, like that's incredible that sometimes the things that can break others are the things that kind of releases us from the change that we're in prior to that.
Yeah, tragedy sometimes can be the stepping stone to triumph, and
Yeah, it really can be.
I was lucky that 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 tragedy I didn't, because there was times sitting in that hospital where I was like, I don't want to be in a world where my dad is in,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and there's times that I had I went very dark mental places to where once he's gone, I'm ready to be gone too. But it was kind of that wanting to make him proud that kept me around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it all makes sense, man.
Yeah, it's so that's a little bit about me.
Hell yeah.
But Well, that got real deep real quick.
Yeah, you know
That's
what?
what this
But
is
that's the
about.
point because people
Yep.
aren't having these discussions openly. They're behind closed doors. And I think sometimes behind closed doors, we always try to be the hero in our own story. So we have a even more difficult time reflecting because I think it's human nature never to kind of let yourself look bad in any scenario and saying you weren't proud of the life that you were living and you could have died and how dark mentally it got. Like, I think that takes a lot to say publicly, and it also takes a lot of ownership to realize what ways you had done wrong in your life and what a significant kind of happening it was, even though it was great loss, that kind of helped you better yourself. And I know as a father myself, like, he's probably so damn proud of you because even though sadly he didn't get to see it, he kind of helped be, the slingshot into who you've become now. So it's like it's crazy how the world works, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's yeah, everything happen. I do believe everything happens for a reason, and there's the old saying that on your tombstone there's the year you were born, the day you died, and there's a little dash in between, and like that dash represents your entire life. And that's kind of what life is. Like that dash is everything in your life that made you the person you were, and your whole life is on that dash.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy.
Well, I think this is gonna be. I think we definitely got to stick to this. I think if we stick to
Yes.
Thursdays and Sundays, I think this is going to be very valuable, not just for us, but anybody listening. I think that just the nature of how we converse with each other is easily digestible. And even in a short time, I feel like we've kind of formed a friendship where we're comfortable talking about things with each other that maybe other men aren't comfortable talking with each other about.
Hmm.
And I had told a couple close friends and quite a few in wrestling what we were going to do, and all of them said, "You know what, man? With all these guys that open up podcasts and they're giving dating advice and talking about women and all this kind of stuff, it's like you guys are opening up an entire different genre of talking about men's mental health. It can also talking about like homosexual and heterosexual relationships and how those can negatively affect your mental health and maybe help other men navigate relationships and help other women out there. I shouldn't say other, but women. My wife said that sometimes when she's free, she's going to sit on and kind of chime in her thoughts about the podcast. So she might even have some points of reference when it comes to that type of talk. But we've already went an hour and a half, and I want to be able to have a podcast length that people can really sit down and
Yes.
enjoy. And I think if we do the same question that I just asked you for me, we're going to be here for about another hour. So if we're going to hop on Sunday, why don't we talk about the darkest time in my life and how it affected me and how I've
Yes.
come out on the other side about it? You want to do that on Sunday and we'll call it a
Let's
night for now?
let's do that. That sounds like a good plan to me.
All right. Well, thank you for opening up, man, and feeling comfortable because, no matter how many people are viewing from the outside, talking is not easy and expressing emotion is not easy. And I think that's what the point of this podcast is. That's the point of, me and you doing this for others and for ourselves because it's very therapeutic to be able to talk. But I think that not only just knowing each other, but not being quote unquote on the job, which will come out later. The studying that I've been doing over the last 5 years and why I have such an interest in this podcast. But I like to play dumb, so we're gonna leave that for a much later episode so that all this makes sense. But um, I really feel that men, I lead a men's group at my church, and sometimes you have to ask the right questions to make people feel comfortable. And my route down therapy, it did not work for me, and we'll talk about that next week because I think, or next week on Sunday because I think that's something that's really important because I know therapy. Some people swear by it and
Yes.
swear that it's the greatest thing ever. For me, it just like you're not asking the right questions, or you're not giving the right answers, and not saying that they weren't correct. They just weren't right in the situation that I was in, and I had to find those answers and results for myself. And I think because I did, and I've done such reflection on myself and even reflection on life, like, man, I feel like sometimes I'm a human lie detector now. But Sunday's episode is going to be really good because I have a lot of stuff to talk about that I thought we could probably get through tonight. But looking at an hour and a half, I'm like, damn, man, it's kind of crazy when you are comfortable with somebody and you do feel open enough to discuss things like this, how long it can really go because it just feels so natural. I mean, I didn't know we were on for an hour and a half until I looked at the timer and I was like,
Yeah.
really, man? I thought we were only talking for about 15 minutes here.
Hey, yeah, it's easy to kind of just get lost in it when you start talking and just have those open conversations, And I think the biggest thing, to take away from what we're doing is what worked for us won't work for everyone, and
Right.
what and that's the biggest thing. You talked about, trying to go through therapy, and it didn't work for you, and that's like and if it didn't work for him doesn't mean people out
Right.
there don't try it. If if it works for you, or it doesn't work for you, or it does work for you, like don't be afraid to try different things because we don't have the answers.
No, no, we're
We
just giving you the answers that worked for us, but
Yes,
everybody's different.
absolutely. Yeah, that's and I think the biggest thing I think about that when it comes to therapy is Howard Stern, who was my inspiration when I got into radio and everything. Um, if you listen to Howard from back when we were growing up compared to Howard now,
Right.
it's two totally different people. And Howard's very open that he's been going to therapy probably for the last 15 or so years, and it's really changed his perspective on things. And it worked for him.
Yeah. And there's some people that just swear by it, and I
Hmm.
don't know. It was more of, I mean, we'll get into it
Oh
because
yeah.
a big part of what the darkest time, and kind of what helped me get out of it, and it's very clear you talking today. I think what helped you kind of get out of that darkness that your father passing away kind of brought onto you was maybe turning your life
Yeah.
into a different path, right? Like, would you
Yep.
say that that was kind of the big, like, aha, this is what it's going to take to kind of move out of this darkness? Would that
Yes.
be a fair assumption?
Yes. 100%. That
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because
definitely.
that was the big part of the question. So on Sunday, I'm gonna take the floor. Obviously, we'll have some chit chat just about life or whatever is going on. But regardless of that, on Sunday we're gonna cover the darkest, and a lot of my darkest time was actually already publicized, but
Right.
not necessarily in my own words and really what I was feeling and what's behind that and how I overcame it. So I think that's gonna be really special episode on Sunday. And I'm actually excited to kind of just fully express it in my own words because it gets twisted so much. Everything gets twisted. And really, it was kind of an accumulation of everything. And I think the result of it, because I just had a very interesting conversation with a friend who's kind of going through, I would say, kind of the same transformation I went through in 2021. And it gets rough, man. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
full, and it might be something you've experienced. So I'm excited and intrigued to get into the conversation on Sunday, and it will
Yes.
be before the AEW pay per view. We'll
Yes.
make sure we're gonna start. What time is the AEW pay per view start on?
I want to say it probably starts at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm thinking if we maybe go on at 4 p.m. Eastern, we should be
That's what I
good.
was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Give us a 2 hour window. So if we talk about an hour and a half, you can still enjoy as a listener or as somebody on this podcast, whoever's watching the AEW pay per view can enjoy it. Looks like a heck of a card. So we'll
Yeah.
see you at 4 p.m. Eastern this Sunday. What is that? April?
6.
Yes, that would be correct.
All right. Well, we'll see
For
everyone.
actually, you know what? Can we do 5 p.m.? This is my weekend with my son.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's do 5 p.m. I just looked up the pay per view starts at 6:30 p.m.
So that's perfect.
So,
That gives
so
us
that
about
gives
an
it
hour and a
a
half
half.
then.
Yep, yep. Because because someone also need to use these streams during the pay per view, so we will definitely, but that'll give us more than enough time.
Yeah, an hour and a half will be good because we'll just chit chat a bit and then we'll go really deep in that conversation because I think that will take a lot up because it will
Yes.
be kind of, as I said, the accumulation of kind of everything.
Yep. So we appreciate everyone tuning in, and we will see everyone on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Uh, we look forward to it. Thank you, guys.
Wait, 5 p.m. Eastern time?
Is that what time you said?
So we can do 4 p.m.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on. Yeah, it starts at 6:30 p.m. Eastern.
So let's do 4:30 because that will give us
4:30.
2 hours, right?
Yes.
You want to do 4:30?
Yeah, 4:30. So that'd be 3:30 your time.
Yes, that will work perfect.
Okay. Yep. Let's do that. So 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
We're getting
We'll
this
be
under
there.
control. As I said, I think now that we got this first episode out of the way, I think that we kind of me and you kind of felt it out and now we know where we're going with everything
Yes.
cuz when you go into something you may have an idea but unless there's that good dialogue back and forth and real good discussion and points that you need to get across to an audience and sometimes to yourselves, I think today really showed that we know what we want to talk about. We know what our message is going to be, and it's going to make every episode not even just easy as a flow wise, but easy to communicate with each other because we don't feel like we can't open up about it. And even though hopefully there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people at some point that kind of listen to this as a place where they can kind of let loose and hear other men just talk about the struggles of life and ideas of how to resolve them, or even just talking about the landscape because there's a lot of things in life that can weigh on mental health that don't get discussed from a serious point of view rather than picking a side to be ultra about, like.
Hmm.
And I think that's where this podcast is going and how people are going to pay attention to it. So I think that this was a great first go at it, and I'm excited for Sunday in the future about it. And now I'll get to watch a couple shows with my wife before she passes out early.
Yep. I got episodes of The Shy to catch up on.
There you
So,
go, my friend. You enjoy it, all right?
all right, you as well, and thank everyone for watching. We will see you on Sunday.